Boom. We're here, man.
What's up, dude? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. First podcast here.
Dude, I've been looking forward to it all week, man. I was excited and honored when you asked me to be your first guest.
Nice, thank you. We'll probably do it again down the road once more stuff comes out. Quite the first day to be here after that new information comes out about the change in regionals, essentially, in competitive CrossFit. I mean, I was saying yesterday that we're almost going into the Great Depression of CrossFit just because I was looking at it so cynical. But then after thinking about it all day yesterday, it's really not horrible. I mean, I think I was so upset about it because I was so close to a goal that I've been looking at to make it to regionals for the last 3 years or whatever, and then all of a sudden that goal's just gone.
Yeah.
And we're not really sure how it's going to be replaced.
I felt the same way. As an athlete yesterday, when I was devastated, I was like to my girlfriend, don't talk to me at all. My life's over. You might as well have taken my legs from me. I've changed my whole life these last 2 or 3 years in the goal to make it to regionals as an individual. I made a lot of sacrifices, and now that it's possibly being taken away, it was a real big, kick in the dick, if you will. But things haven't been fully announced yet, so now I'm trying to think more positive. But as a coach, I'm kind of excited about it because it presents a new opportunity to grow and learn a new way to program for athletes going into this situation. Because I'm sure, as we'll discuss, periodization leading into, the CrossFit Open or regionals or the games is pretty straightforward if you've read a book, you know what I mean? But now we have all these different external factors coming in, and it's, on the coach's side, a huge challenge now. We all have to adapt. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Yeah, we all got to adapt, and I think there's going to be a lot of people that throw the towel in the bag. I mean, it's just completely new format. There's no doubt. I mean, the main thing is that CrossFit's trying to devalue competitive fitness.
For sure.
And they are, and I think they're going to be successful. I mean, in the article, Greg Glassman essentially said that they're trying to shift away from competitive fitness in the games. They're trying to make it less of a spectacle of elite fitness and more of a spectacle of health. Yes, all the competitive athletes, I do believe, will still be there just because they're going to have their hands tied in it. And I mean, good for CrossFit for coming up with a structure because I do think it's going to work. Every competitive athlete will still be doing CrossFit from the way they designed it. And the main reason that everyone's going to do it is because they're going to have their hands in the 16 CrossFit affiliated competitions throughout the year.
For sure.
And that's, essentially our ticket now. That's our regionals. So for the next... they're not going to start till November of 2019, like I said in the article, but that is now our regionals. So We are not going to be under the generic spotlight at regionals like we all wanted. It's going to be maybe it's Wadapalooza, maybe it's Turkey Challenge for us, we don't know. But now that's what we're aiming at. And then like you said, the individualization behind it, has to be individualized now because it's at different times of the year.
Yeah, especially because, with CrossFit, it's a super high neurologically taxing sport if you're really pushing the envelope. You can't compete at all 16 of those qualifying matches. So it's not like I have an elite athlete who's possibly making it to regionals. Let's sign them up for all 16. First of all, that's a financial strain on the athlete if they're not a sponsored big name athlete. And you just can't compete that many times a year, especially if you're competing at a high level. And back to what you said about Greg Glassman wanting to shift more towards the health side of CrossFit. I think, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and like I said, I'm a coach and I'm an athlete. I don't know really anything about business. My girlfriend runs the company. Without her, Dark Horse wouldn't be a thing. So I don't know from this side of things, but on the outside looking in, I think Greg Glassman saying that is a cop-out because I don't think the games or regionals ever took away from the health side of things. And I think, if anything, the competitive side of CrossFit made CrossFit. So we look back to, I don't even know when the first year of CrossFit was, 2007 at Aerobic at the ranch. That's how CrossFit started, and that's a competition. And yeah, it is globally known as a fitness methodology, I'm trying to figure out how to say this, that does make people healthier, fitter, stronger, more so than going to your 24-hour fitness. I don't think the games or regionals takes away from that. I think it's a cop-out. Him mentioning in the article, they spent $1 million competing, hosting regionals at Brazil in the same arena that the Olympics was held. Well, that was a really bad business decision. You can, for those of you guys listening that are local to Colorado and have been to the Turkey Challenge, you can very easily host regionals at the Turkey Challenge. and it would have costed you a shitload less than $1 million a year or for a competition. So I think that's a cop-out in him trying to make an excuse. You go into every gym now in CrossFit, and you want to think that people are concerned about health, but everyone's going and looking at the whiteboard after class and seeing who they beat, what other times people got in the class before them, what numbers people are hitting. CrossFit has now been made into a competitive thing from the very lowest level to the highest level, and I don't think it should be that way. I think people should be more concerned about coming in and getting the stimulus of the workout. But 10 years now of competing with the games, that's what CrossFit is. And I think taking that aspect and trying to de-emphasize it takes the sexiness away from CrossFit, in my opinion.
I agree. I mean, that was the meat and potatoes of Greg Glassman's idea to devalue it, and I agree with you. I don't think it's a good decision, but I do think it might work in his favor. So the money argument, that falls apart right away. Like, it's obviously not based solely off of money.
Yeah.
And if it was, all he had to do is say, okay, regionals are done. All we're doing now is age group qualifiers for everyone.
For sure.
Right? Done. That's all regionals gone. No money now. They're probably going to be making more money if they did that than what they're doing now.
Correct.
So it's not a money thing. Like, that's obvious. He's just trying to shift the pendulum away from competitive to more so health-based. But like you were saying, is that even good? I would probably be with you. I don't think that's good. I mean, I think CrossFit gyms are really popular because there's people like me and you. People look at me and you on the streets and they're like, oh my gosh, Justin Biays is so freaking fit.
Yeah.
I want to be like him. And then they talk to you and then you're like, dude, this CrossFit stuff is legit. So then what do? They go join a CrossFit gym. So now imagine if that company, CrossFit, you start becoming resentful towards them, saying bad things. You think those people are going to keep walking in the CrossFit gyms? Probably not. But I'm not saying all of us are going to become resentful for CrossFit, because we're probably not, because there's still some form of landscape. Is it as good for us? Absolutely not. But is it still there? And do we still have some chance to make the CrossFit game? Sure. Is it harder? Yes. Is it not as good for us? Absolutely. But
yeah, I mean, just got to work harder now, I guess. Be realistic about your goals. I mean, I'm pretty good at CrossFit. You're pretty good at CrossFit. There's a lot of dudes that are great at CrossFit, but none of us are beating Matt Frazier. So the new format with the fittest person in the country going, I think is a real shit idea, because there's going to be some country that you can't even pronounce somewhere. The fittest dude there and the one affiliate that they have is going to earn a spot to the CrossFit Games and just get hammered. Meanwhile, while there's countries like Australia, America, the Canadian regions that have a lot of guys and females that are competing against each other and all within the top 10 of the games and aren't going to get to go. Meanwhile, some dude who wouldn't have placed, in the top 150 in any other region, even top 500 maybe, is going to the CrossFit Games.
yeah,
now.
dude, he wouldn't have been able to line up for the clean ladder this year. Like, how does Castro program that when like half the countries out there can't even go into the program?
For sure.
They just get capped right away on the first barbell.
If it were me changing the format of the competition style of CrossFit, it would be to, one, if it's a money issue, host the regionals in a cheaper venue. One, definitely could be done. Have every regional the same weekend, and then don't have a podium spot at each regionals, but take the top 40 scores from both men and women, so the fittest people are going.
Easier.
So, like, for example, I think I read this somewhere. Don't hold me to the statement. You can fact check it, whatever. The winner of our region this year, Sean Sweeney, I think wouldn't have even taken like top 15 in the West Coast region. So we're not, even with the old format, the fittest people still aren't going.
And that's what's going to, and yeah, I think that's going to change now, because kind of like going into the format, you kind of mentioned the open now. And then at first yesterday, I was like, well, the open's over. No one's going to do the open, which that's not true, because the way they designed it, you are still going to have to do the open, because if these are CrossFit sanctioned events, the way the registration will work is the best people who first register for the event will get the spot. So if you place 800th in the open, and then there's whatever 40 guys ahead of you that place better than you, they're going to get the spot. You're not. So it's not going to be the kind of thing you finish the open, right away you're going to a competition. It might be the kind of thing, 5 of them you might not get invited to, but if you're willing to travel to Dubai, you get in.
For sure.
But like the local one you might not get into if there's people baiting you out. It's just if you can travel. So the open, I do think, will stay around, just because the 16 CrossFit sanctioned events is now regionals.
I like that. Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, competing should be available to everyone, but that is why there is, I don't want to say it in like a disrespectful way, like lower level competitions. I think with the 16 qualifying competitions that they're talking about holding, you should have to earn your spot. It shouldn't be just anybody can fucking do it, because then we're going to have 1,000 people register for, the Granite Games, or let's say it's the Turkey Challenge. You're going to have 1,000 people registering, and there's going to be people who can't even do a ring muscle up trying to compete to go to the games. It's going to make a mockery of it if that's the case, and I think that you should have to earn your spot one way or another.
Yeah, and I do think it's. I mean, you're right. If that did happen, it would be a mockery, but I don't think that's the way it'll be. It'll be super competitive, and in some sense, it might be more competitive than the games.
For sure.
I mean, if you think about, let's say that at Wadapalooza, if you had Noah Olson, Scott Panchek, let's say Frazier did it, you have all these guys, the best in the U.S., that's going to be almost more competitive than the games, because only 1 or 2 of them are going to go to the games. So then who knows, maybe in 2 years, the publicity is way more covering these competitions that we're almost bashing on now because the formats change. But we just don't know. The landscape is evolving, and it's scary, but it's what it's going to be. Like, we can complain about it all we want, but it's not going to change. We just have to deal with it.
I totally agree. Yeah. Like I said earlier, it's all speculation. CrossFit hasn't announced anything yet. I'm assuming they're going to soon, hopefully, so we can start preparing our athletes and preparing ourselves as athletes for this change and how we're going to need to change our training, because some things are definitely going to need to change.
Yep, for everyone.
Yep.
All right, I think we got a good handle on this new format. It's not the end of the world for CrossFit competitive athletes. I think we realize that. We still got a format, just not quite the way we want it, but
for sure.
That's okay. So you, Justin, how long you been doing this whole CrossFit shebang?
Yeah, so I started CrossFit probably 2012, right when I got back from Afghanistan. While I was deployed, we kind of only had limited equipment, and the lieutenant that was in charge of my platoon kind of was doing like CrossFit style workouts, and I would go over and make fun of him and say he was stupid because he wasn't doing bicep curls and shit. Then I tried one with him, and it absolutely destroyed me. I thought I was fit and like super cool at that time. I would be like in our little makeshift weight room while I was deployed, smoking a cigarette, while lifting weights. So I got absolutely destroyed. Didn't touch a CrossFit workout until I got back from Afghanistan, which was probably 6 months later. I watched some YouTube videos of Rich Froning, and I was just like blown away by this dude. I was like, this dude is crazy. Like I think the clean and jerk ladder was the first one I watched. I think he clean and jerked probably 350, and I think that was the 2012 games, 2013 games. Maybe I started in 2013. I don't know. I was like, that's cool. He can lift weights. And then I kept watching, and he's doing all this other crazy shit like ring muscle ups, just some stuff. It looked really cool. So that Sunday, I remember it being a Sunday, I sent an email to CrossFit SoCo in Colorado Springs. Went in with a huge ego, like I was the shit, just like most, 20-year-old meatheads. Got absolutely crushed in the intro class by like soccer moms and stuff, like no shit, like soccer moms rolling up with their kids. So I was like, that's unacceptable. Like I gotta start doing this. First open, I was like, I'm going to regionals. Like, this is my year. I'm making it to the games. I've been doing CrossFit, 3 months at that point. Took like 1,000th in the region and just got absolutely just annihilated. And that was like the point where I became addicted. And I was like, okay, I'm not good at this. I want to be really good at this. So ever since then, it's just been kind of a pursuit to make it to regionals. Went in 2016 on a team. So that's when I got really like the taste for blood. And I was like, this is so cool. I love this environment. So as that journey progressed, I learned more about, like nutrition and recovery. Realized how wrong I was doing everything. And, 5-6 years into it, I've finally figured it out. I got my nutrition on point. I hired a coach, Brian Foley from OPEX Fitness, which we'll get into as far as like my certifications and stuff, because I've learned a lot from them. Got the training dialed in for what I need. Individualization is a big part of it. Like I said, nutrition, recovery. Just when I got everything on point, this new format change happened. So
your whole life, all of our, a lot of people listening to it, our lives are almost based around this. You work in a gym, you work out all day, and then this bomb's dropped on us.
Ask my girlfriend, man. All I do is coach, sleep, eat, and train. Like, we don't leave the house. We don't do anything.
People the same. They're like, how are you doing? I'm like, good, sleep, eat, work out.
They're like, dude, what are you doing tonight? It's Saturday. And I'm like, dude, it's 9. I'm about to go to bed. And like, I got to train tomorrow morning.
That's just what so many people don't understand. Like, I try to go out just to have some form of balance like every other weekend. But like, you go out, have a few drinks that Saturday night, you don't sleep as well.
Yeah.
So then you wake up Sunday morning, kind of half of the night's sleep probably at best. You're not nearly recovered. So then you go into Monday, probably not 100%. And in this sport, if you want to make it to the top, it's all about being 100% all the time. And if you're not, you're going to get left behind. And then some other things that I just thought I have to talk about that I just love is when you first started CrossFit, I think we all did the same thing. You were like, oh, Rich Froning can do it. I can do it too. I saw him do Fantasyland, and I was like, he made that look easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to try it. And then you get into it, you do Fran, and then you're just done. You're toast. And then you watch that guy. That was the video that got me hooked on CrossFit. I watched him do Fantasyland, and it was like he got off the couch, did Fantasyland, sat down, and it was over. But I always have people come to the gym. Back when I was in college, I had this guy come to the gym, and he didn't want to do a class workout, and just because he thought he was above it. He thought he was going to be the next Rich Froning. And then I was like, dude, just do a class workout. Like, you are not that fit. And then he didn't want to do it. And then later in the day, I was like, all right, I'm working out at like 3 in the afternoon. Come work out with me. And I was just like, I'm just going to freaking put this kid in the ground. And then we did just like a couple couplets back to back, and he was just toast. And then he realized then, like, okay, there's a lot to this, and I'm not nearly as fit. But we all do it. We all see it happen. It's like when you watch the live announcement. You watch the live announcement, and you're like, I'm going to fly through this. And then 5 minutes in, you start getting winded.
Every single workout. I'm like, they maintained that pace and had a straight face and weren't even breathing heavy this whole time. I think I'm going to go with the same pace. And you do it, and you get 5 minutes in, and you're just wrecked, dude. You're like, that was a terrible idea. And then we're all redoing it on Monday at half the intensity that they were doing it. That's why CrossFit's so deceiving. You watch a high-level competition, and they all make it look so easy. So easy, dude. Even 5 years in, I was watching regionals on my computer this year. 333's event, it was actually. And all of them are just on the rower, smiling, easy going. And then it pans over to the camera on their monitors, and they're all holding like a 145 to 148 3K pace. And they make it look like they're, rowing a 2-minute 500. And you know how bad a 145, 148 pace hurts. And you're like, holy shit, dude, these guys are making this really crazy pace look really easy. So it's super deceiving.
For them. It is for them. Yeah. They could probably, let's say you were to stop right then and there, have them get off the rower, they could probably stand up and just breathe through their nose.
Yeah, they're fine.
They're that comfortable, and their thresholds are that high that they can work at that high of a force output, get off the rower, and just be chilling.
For sure.
And that's just how fit they are. And then the average competitors like us, I mean, we're going to have to probably take a minute of good breaths, and then we'll be there. But they can just buffer that well. That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
So yeah, you got into fitness, found CrossFit. You were like, I freaking love this stuff. Just like start drinking the Kool-Aid like all of us. And then you started talking to James Fitzgerald or something at OPEX.
Yep.
And then you went to school for exercise science or strength and conditioning, something around there.
So I went to, right after I got out of the Army, like 10 days later, I started my undergrad in exercise physiology. Started that program, got into it. I was coaching CrossFit at that time as well, so just coaching, general population and group classes. I didn't even know what OPEX was at the time. I was coaching at CrossFit 720, which we're in right now. This is the year we went to regionals. We hired a coach named Mike Lee from OPEX. He's their head coach at OPEX. Super great coach, super great guy. For those of you who don't know, Tanel Reed or Tanel Brulin, I think she goes by that now. She took 5th 2 years ago. I'm not sure what she took at the games this year, but that's her coach. He started coaching us, and this was, like I said, just preparing for team. I just noticed myself getting like so much better. We were doing a lot of unusual things. I was used to just hitting like a strength and then an open style Metcon every day. I think when Mike was coaching us, we were hitting one Metcon a week, if not one Metcon every other week, and just doing like crazy row intervals and not Metcons per se, but Metcon style, quick rest, a couple minutes, recover, go at it again. It was never like a triplet, like 20-minute AMRAP or something. I noticed myself getting so much better that way. So I talked to April DiGiantonio. She's the owner of CrossFit 720, multiple-time regional athlete, who happens to be my athlete through Dark Horse now, about OPEX more, and she told me about their certification. So I got into that. Really learned a lot through that. It's a pretty expensive and like rigorous and long certification process. However, I don't think you can put a price on education. So I learned, a ton from that. I'm really glad I found that because I wasn't too happy, with what I learned from my undergrad. You don't really, I hate to say it, like I don't want to devalue my bachelor's degree in exercise science. but you don't really learn a whole lot. It kind of just shows you where the doors are, and how to find this information out there that allows you to become a better coach, but they don't actually give you the information. So there was never like, let's talk about aerobic capacity. Let's talk about lactic threshold. How do we prepare an athlete for lactic threshold? How do we make their lactic threshold better? What's VO2 max? It was more like, how do we do a body fat caliper test, which is still useful, or like,
it's more so general public.
Yeah, general public, and like,
and if not, it's sport-specific skills that we know will help football players, basketball players. But the only problem with that is those people are using one energy system primarily. We are using all of them.
Yeah, you have to be
so
good at
then
everything.
Almost all the research that we have on it, it doesn't go out the window, but you have to cherry pick it because you're taking, you'll take the phosphagen, the explosive system from football, then you're going to take the glycolytic system from basketball, and then you're going to see what works there. I mean, am I right? Is that kind of what you do? You kind of you can't just take only the research on one system. You have to, there's so many systems we use in CrossFit that's why going to a university nowadays, you're going to learn stuff. Like you said, you can't just completely devalue it. Like I studied exercise science. It was good, but CrossFit's just so different. Like we're not researching CrossFit yet, really. Like
it's too new, so new.
Let alone that competitive CrossFit, we're not even researching competitive CrossFit. So places like OPEX and others, I don't even know the other strength and conditioning certifications within the CrossFit realm, but I mean, if you're trying to learn more about strength and conditioning and how to become a coach, I mean, you're gonna learn from the best in CrossFit rather than learning from a certification at a university, because they're not doing it at universities.
For sure, yeah, and university, like academia, especially in America, super outdated. They're going, with block periodization still, which we've seen now time and time again.
Can you go over that? I'm not block periodization.
Yeah, so like, let's say you had a competition 12 weeks from now. We would do like a hypertrophy phase, 4 weeks long. And then after that 4-week period, you would completely stop training for that. You would start training for strength for another 4 weeks. And then the last 4 weeks before the competition, it would be like a power development phase. And the problem with that is by the time you finish your power development phase and get into the competition, you've lost all benefit from the beginning phases because you haven't trained those qualities in long enough. So that's really what they're teaching in academia, especially in America. If you went over to like Russia or Germany, they're teaching you the good shit. All the good stuff that I've learned has been from, Russian translated books and German translated books. So stuff like the book Super Training or Science and Practice of Strength Training. There's written by like Yuri Vyshinsky and stuff like that, famous exercise physiologists. Another problem with academia that I had with my undergrad program is they like won't acknowledge that CrossFit works. So we'd be having a lecture on something and I'd raise my hand and be like, one of my CrossFit athletes did this, and you told me that you can't train the aerobic system and strength training at the same time. Well, how come we have people squatting 500 pounds and running 5-minute miles? And they'd be like, I don't know what CrossFit is. Do you mean high intensity interval training? Just to be a dick, because they're so against CrossFit in academia still, in most places. I don't speak for everybody.
So one thing about that I think is interesting. I'm curious to see what you're going to think about this. And I was always the kid, like you just said, like they present something and I'm just like, I'm in the CrossFit world when I was going through school. So my understanding was definitely a little bit different from what they were teaching me. It was this doctorate that came in and he was applying for a position and he had to give a lecture, and in a part of his lecture he was talking about the phosphagen system, and he was like, I don't care what you say, but the phosphagen system is over after, I think he said like 8 seconds. And I was thinking to myself, I was like, okay, and this might be true, you might say it's true. And I was thinking, so I get on an assault bike. If I get on an assault bike for 8 seconds, I can't get those RPMs higher than, we'll say, I bet 130. If I can't get them for higher than 130 for 8 seconds, but I bet I can hold 130 for 16.
Yeah.
So does that mean the phosphagen system lasts longer than he said? And he was trying, I mean, he knew there were naysayers out there, and he was like, if you disagree with this, you're just disagreeing with biochemistry. And he might be right, but I was just thinking, like in the CrossFit world, I was like, my max power output, I know I can hold for more than 8 seconds. And I just thought I feel like the bike's the perfect test for that. Like, what's your max output? How long can you do it for? That's almost the phosphagen system, right?
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I did 50 cal assault bike, or 52 cals in 19 seconds.
That's got to be phosphagen system.
I pretty much maintained the same RPM the whole time. Where that comes into play is the aerobic energy system and how it improves the phosphagen system, which we can get into when we talk more about program design and like we call it CP battery training, like glycolytic, lactic endurance, lactic power stuff, and how a 10K row is going to improve that. So yes, the phosphagen system can be extended out past 10 seconds. 100%.
I mean, that what you just said is such a controversial statement. I mean, I agree with you that you're pretty much saying if you improve one energy system, another one can be improved too.
Oh, 100%.
I mean, but wouldn't you say that's especially in academia, modern strength and conditioning academia, that would be controversial?
Yeah, they'll tell you that if you train the aerobic system too much, you're going to get weaker, when in actuality, it's the opposite. Because the better aerobic system you have, the better you can recover, which means the heavier you can lift more often, which means you get stronger.
I agree. I mean, that's just why, CrossFit's pushing the boundaries on what we know for human capacity.
For sure.
I mean, we're getting into pretty thick of it here. We'll get back to it in a second. Obviously, you got quite a bit of knowledge that you received from OPEX and your college education.
For sure.
And you're still just finishing up your master's, you said?
Yeah, I have one class to go until I have my master's degree in exercise physiology with a concentration in sports performance and periodization.
Yeah, so you got the academia side, and then you got it from OPEX, what's going on in the CrossFit world. So then you got to the point where you're like, okay, I know the nuts and bolts of this, and then you went out on your own, and now you have your company, Dark Horse.
Yep.
So then you started Dark Horse, and tell me exactly what you guys do. When did you guys even start?
Yeah, the madness of Dark Horse. We started, I think we've been official now for about a year. Really kind of a lame story and how it starts. But anyways, I was coaching general population. I love it, don't get me wrong. I'll forever coach general population. But it doesn't quite do it for me per se. You know what I mean? It just doesn't get me as excited. So I had been an individual client for OPEX for individual design for about a year at this point. I was seeing my progress. I was loving it, loving how hard I was being pushed. I was deep into the OPEX certification process at that point. I've been learning a lot through school that I haven't, and reading a lot of my own books on my own time that I wasn't getting to really implement within general population people. So I was laying in bed at 2 a.m. one night, and I shook my girlfriend, and she's like, what? I'm like, what? And I was like, I'm starting a company, and we're going to call it Dark Horse Performance. And she's like, well, what are you going to do? What is this company? What does it do? I was like, I'm going to work with athletes just like OPEX works with me. So the next morning, she works for Wells Fargo. We started drawing up and getting the LLC going. I contacted my buddy Jake Eustrom, who is one of the Dark Horse coaches and the head coach here at CrossFit 720. I was like, do you want to go in on this with me? So we started it. Bo Dorning, the owner of V23 Athletics, great coach, asked him if he wanted to join. Now we got Tyler Yoder on board. He's the head coach at CrossFit Modig. And Austin Bartosh, great coach. Just hired on a nutrition coach, Griffin Zingering, I think I'm saying it right, assistant head coach at CrossFit 720. What we do, primarily we work with competitive athletes of all sports, so CrossFit, powerlifting, weightlifting, field sport, if that's the case, if that's who comes to us. I mean, we've had rowers come to us, collegiate rowers. That's really kind of the most extreme it's gotten outside. We've had, one endurance runner. But mainly our population that we deal with is competitive CrossFit athletes. And they come to us, we run, full individualized programming based on their function and their goal. And by function, I mean the level they compete at. Obviously, individualized programming, a games athlete isn't going to do what someone who's competing, at a local, the triple threat competition. So yeah, in a nutshell, we manage all their training. We use Fitbot, which is a pretty great software to deliver all their training to them. Manage all their nutrition, all their recovery. We take all the guesswork out for them, and they just do what we tell them, essentially. And it's not blindly following. We have a lot of athletes who ask questions, and I highly encourage that because the athlete should be emotionally and physically involved in their journey of where they're going. Does that kind of answer the question?
Yeah, no doubt. So, but mainly sports performance programming primarily catered to CrossFit athletes. So yeah, that's awesome. At the time now, I would say, yesterday, like I was saying, I was so cynical about this new program, and I was like, oh my gosh, all these businesses are going to go under. I'm starting to think the opposite now, and here's why. Because people like me are your average clientele, borderline regional athlete, almost there. So now if I follow like the traditional blog, these blogs are toast if you ask me, if you know anything about what you're doing. And here's why. I am going to be trying to peak for, I do it in October, and then I'm going to have to pick one. And we were talking about this earlier. Let's say I pick one in, we'll say March. That means I have to plan my body to peak to March. And that is not something very easily to do if you don't know what you're doing. If you're just following a blog, you're not going to peak. And that's at our level. If you're going into a competition not peaked, you're better off not being there. And you really are. So I think you're in a really good place because you are working with people one-on-one, like you said, making a program for them based on what they need. So let's say you had somebody like me, borderline regional athlete, we would talk. I'd be like, okay, I did good or whatever in the open. I'm going to try and qualify and make a spot for, let's say next year it's the turkey challenge. I'm like, okay, I'm trying to register for the turkey challenge, and they change it to January. I don't know, hypothetical here. So then you're going to be like, okay, so we're peaking you for this. That's how it's going to start. Mm-hmm. So then let's say I were to follow a blog style programming. I mean, I don't even know how these blog programs are going to go about it. But before we even go into how would they go about it, just like as in with the current landscape of what's going on now, like why would somebody not want to follow a blog style program? Like why would you say, what would you say the pitfalls are to a normal blog style program?
Yeah, good question. And this isn't to bash any of the
because
blogs
that's what
out there.
Almost probably, I don't know, 85% of people follow?
Yeah, I would say majority of the competitive CrossFit community right now is following Misfit or CompTrain or the Invictus blog. All ran by very educated, very smart, very well-respected coaches within the community. That being said, pitfalls of blog programming, and I'm sure they would agree. If they don't agree with what I'm about to say, then I question their motives for coaching athletes. The first one, I would say is the biggest one, is lifestyle factors. Blogs don't account for the athlete's lifestyle. So you have 35-year-old John Doe who works 40 hours a week, has 2 kids, stressful job environment. He sits all day, so he's has some anatomical issues from sitting all day. Then he follows CompTrain, which any of you guys have seen CompTrain.
Front squats all the time.
Yeah, and like 4 hours worth of work, of just crazy shit. And then this guy is like, oh, Katrin Davis-Daughter and Matt Frazier and Cole Sager and all them do it. So he goes after his 40-hour-a-week job, sitting all day, multiple kids, probably didn't sleep well because they were up crying. And this is just an example. And now he's going to go follow this blog programming that's ideally designed for the 22-year-old regional athlete who's likely not working 40 hours a week and has multiple kids, who's eating a perfect nutrition and taking recovery protocols 100% seriously. So this guy, following a very strenuous blog, going home, not doing anything for recovery, already stressed, now his progress is going to start to go downhill really fucking fast. So lifestyle factors, if you have a coach,
before you keep going there, like this guy, if he were to have knowledge on exercise science, he might be able to take that blog and be like, and cherry pick it a little bit.
For sure.
I think I would argue it can be successful for some if you're willing to do that. But I would say so many people just look at the blog and they're like, got to do everything.
For sure.
I'm doing every single piece. I'm doing all 4 hours and then going home and trying to feed my family, and they're just going to be super stressed out.
For sure.
So some people can do it, but I would say overwhelmingly, no.
Yeah, no. For sure. And people, especially in the CrossFit community, we're preached intensity and, volume. So people think more is better. So they're going to see that 4-hour training day and be like, fuck yeah, I'm going to hit this 4 hours every single day. And the more I put in, the better I'm going to do in the open. When really they're overtraining and just making themselves worse every single day. You got to give your body ample time to recover. With a non-blog situation, a coach manages that. So you are verbally communicating with your coach like, hey, Monday and Tuesday were crazy, hard training days. My kids were up all night. I had some long work days. My back's bugging me because I've been sitting all day. The coach is going to go into your programming and tailor, the next week to that to make sure you recover and then, you're getting back to normal training. That's the number one, I think, the biggest downfall to a blog, because lifestyle choices is the ultimate, factor towards success in the sport anyways. The second one is neuromuscular efficiency. So this one we're going to have to get pretty deep in. What neuromuscular efficiency is how deep someone can dig into their nervous system. So an example of that, just for easy numbers, let's say you and I both have a 405-pound back squat. We do that back squat, I might be accessing 80% of my muscle fibers, and you might be accessing 95% of your muscle fibers. How we know that is we do a 1 rep max back squat, rest exactly 10 minutes, and then do an AMRAP at 85%. We have the same 1 RM back squat. You might get 14 reps, I might get 3. It doesn't mean you're any stronger than me. It just means you recruited less muscle fiber when you did that 1 RM test. So that dictates our rep schemes. So an example of how...
Hold on. So I like that. That's interesting.
Yep.
So you're essentially saying you are recruiting more muscles for that 1 rep max back squat so it's easier?
No, it's harder for me.
It's harder.
It's not harder. It's more taxing to my system.
Because you're using more muscles.
Mm-hmm. So you and I are the
Okay.
same strength. However, I have to use more muscle to do it than you. You just can't physically and genetically dig deep into that nervous system like I can, which this will go down a huge rabbit hole of your essence as an athlete. So are you powerful or enduring type thing? So how this dictates our rep schemes. So I got what I say in the example.
14. 14
I got
3.
4, you got 14. So 14 is an extreme example. I've seen females get 14. So let's say for you got 8 reps and I got 4 reps. Now, if we were following the same programming and let's say it's a 5x5 back squat at 85%, although that would still be pretty extreme for everybody, you would be able to complete those 5 sets of 5 reps because you're able to do 8 reps at your 85%. 5 sets of 5 reps at my 85%, I wouldn't even be able to complete the first set because in my neuromuscular efficiency test, I was only able to get 4. So there's no way I'm doing 5x5. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I like that. I've never thought about
that
it.
dictates the rep schemes.
I've never thought about that in terms of strength. I'm thinking about this more. I don't know if it translates in more so open style workouts.
100% translates to it.
Okay. So then when I'm thinking about this in open style workouts, and this is something so important, I think, for everybody who's listening to understand that there is a huge difference in training and competing.
100%.
Because if you perform the same as you do in training as you do in competing, you're not going to go anywhere.
I'll tell you
just
what,
not.
You're competing if your blog programming says 4 time every day. You're training if you're doing interval work and percentage work at your maximal capacity. So if I told you to do, what we do today, we had a 6-minute AMRAP, of some bullshit and it was at 80%. It wasn't full go. The goal is to be repeatable. So back to the neuromuscular efficiency thing and how it ties into that. The person who is CrossFit's an endurance sport. People will argue with me on that, but without a doubt, CrossFit is 100% an endurance sport. The person who can make their contractions the most aerobic, the longest, is going to win every single time. So people with lower neuromuscular efficiency, the person who gets higher reps than 85%, is geared to be better at CrossFit than the person who gets lower reps and has a higher power output. So I'm a good example of that. I'm extremely powerful. I got 3 or 4 reps in my neuromuscular efficiency test. I can hit 50 cals on the assault bike in 19 seconds. I have a really good fucking Fran time. So you look at all these things on paper and you're like, why is this dude not at the games? Or why is this dude not at regionals? That's because my contractions are less aerobic than the person who gets more reps in their neuromuscular efficiency test.
They can dig deeper in that open style Metcon away from the aerobic. They can dig to
me, it takes more powerful contractions. So if we do a 7-minute AMRAP against each other, I'm exerting more energy than you are. You're able to maintain.
Aerobic.
I'm going to get 4 minutes in and fall off.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
That's understandable. So then, I think that's the meat of it right there.
And that's
it's
the
more sustainable.
individualization.
Because if it's individualized, you're going to be doing something that's attacking that neuromuscular efficiency.
Correct. So if you and I have the same 1 RM back squat, we're still doing totally different training programs. That means from a rep scheme standpoint, from a percentage standpoint, and the duration of conditioning that we're doing.
Yep. It's like today, both of us were able to pick up that barbell, and we had 3 movements. If we could recover on the barbell and then go right back into it, 95-pound thrusters, pretty light. If you feel like you can recover on that, you probably have a pretty high neuromuscular efficiency, right?
You'd have a low neuromuscular efficiency.
Low is better.
Low is better.
Okay.
For CrossFit.
Okay.
If you're a power lifter and Olympic lifter, you want high neuromuscular efficiency.
Because it's 1, so low, so it's more sustainable, more aerobic.
Yep. So you come in predetermined to already be better at CrossFit, and that's not to say the person with high neuromuscular efficiency is going to suck at CrossFit because half the games athletes are high neuromuscular efficiency athletes. They just have good training practices that account for that. So their conditioning is tailored to that. You know what I mean? That's why our conditioning session was 75 minutes long today, because I'm a high neuromuscular efficiency athlete and I need to get more conditioned and more aerobic. I need to learn to make my contractions more repeatable and sustainable, Whereas other athletes, might need to get more powerful. So for example, someone who's a marathon runner coming into CrossFit, they're going to need more power output training.
Yep.
Sure.
And that's where, you're already seeing it. Like, I think about Hunter McIntyre. I don't know if you've heard of him, the obstacle course racer.
Guy.
He's dominating these races, and he says what he does in the off season is he does CrossFit.
Yeah.
So he's working the other end of this neuromuscular efficiency, because usually he's running all year. I saw a video, he ran 10 miles, 6-minute pace across all 10. And then in the off season, he's doing CrossFit. So he's working that top end neuromuscular efficiency. So then when he gets to that low end, he can sustain it super easy. He gets a higher output, and it's more aerobic.
So you just look at the strength speed continuum. So it's a continuum of different qualities. So you have on one end absolute speed. So that'd be like, sprinting, body weight sprint, 40-yard dash or something. Speed strength. So that's like plyometrics. Strength speed, which is Olympic lifting. Then you have absolute strength, which is like, 1RM deadlift, 1RM back squat. Basically, you find out where the athlete is on the strength speed continuum, and you try and bring them, more relative to their sport. So if it's an enduring sport, you want to kind of bring them more to the middle rather than having them just be strong. For example, I have a 355-pound squat clean, 18.1 after, hard Metcon. You go into that 1-rep max clean, I was only able to hit 297. So that's a problem. That's because my contractions weren't aerobic and I wasn't sustainable.
And another term for this would be, like the continuum, are you more anaerobic or are you more aerobic?
Yep. So I would be more anaerobic.
Yep.
So I'm from a starting point, starting at a disadvantage. I wouldn't really say a disadvantage, but my genetics are elsewhere, and that's the importance of individualization. Is your coach, if you have an educated, knowledgeable coach, is going to bring you more to that side where you need to be. So blogs do not account for that. Everyone gets the same thing, same rep schemes. So if you and I were both following comp train, it might see a back squat at 5x5 at 85%. I wouldn't even be able to do the first set, and that might be easy for you. But it doesn't mean you're any stronger. We have the same 1RM. So that's the second most important pitfall of a blog. Third most, or not most, it's just one of them, is gender, male versus female. Females can generally, and I say this generally because it's not true in all cases, can handle a lot more volume than males. They have less testosterone in their hormone levels, so they can't tax their body as much. Like I said, in general, we've all seen Brooke Wells deadlift, like 425. So obviously, when she hits a 425-pound deadlift, she's taxing the shit out of her nervous system. So like I said, very general guideline. Females can handle more volume. Their fitness decays faster, so that means
you're saying they can handle more volume.
They can do more than guys. Yep. Okay. So they can train.
Does this have to do you think because they're more aerobic, because we know they have more slow twitch muscle fibers?
Yep.
That's why. Okay.
Yep. That's why I've seen females do up to 14 reps in a neuromuscular efficiency test, is because they can't dig into their nervous system.
I know. I've heard Katrin's like that. Like, she can hit her almost 1 RM for 10 times.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
And that's why she's so fucking good.
That's why she's so good.
Because she's so aerobic and so repeatable.
Blog just doesn't take into, we just went over so many individual differences. And at this, where the sport's at right now, if you're not taking those in, you're not going to be getting better.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, if you're not adapting to where the sport is going, you're going to get lost in the crowd. And that's just the case. I've heard, I'm going to have him on for a while, Jeff Shute. He was following this program. I hadn't heard of him. He was like, well, if I follow Comp Trainer Misfit, I'm going to get just as better as everybody else. Yeah. Like, if you're doing the same thing as everybody else, you're going to get the same results as everybody else.
Exactly.
You're on the same leaderboard as everybody else, so it's not going to help you.
For sure. Females generally need more upper body push and pull work than guys. You've seen CrossFit female athletes, they've got fucking jacked upper bodies, and that's because their coaches know that, and they're doing a lot of push-pull strength work. Generally, females are they have like 25% less upper body mass and strength as, the normal guy does. So in order to, make them compatible at that level of CrossFit, they need more upper body volume. What else with females? Their fitness decays a lot faster. So for example, if you're tapering for a competition, so let's say we have the Turkey Challenge. It's like, November 17th or whatever. 2 weeks out from that, for most guys, you want to start lowering your volume of training and either keeping the intensity the same or slightly raising it to allow your body to heal but maintain fitness. If we do that for 2 weeks for a female in some cases, and tapers can last up to 4 weeks, this is just a general example, they'll lose a lot of their fitness qualities that the male had developed. So A female, you can honestly train them hard as shit up to about a week to maybe even 4 or 5 days before a competition. You can't do that with most males, and that's going back to their neuromuscular efficiency. They haven't been able to tax their body as much as guys. So I would say that was one of the biggest pitfalls. Neuromuscular efficiency we went over. I would say lifters' height and size. We were talking about this earlier about how the sport's changing. Believe it or not, a taller lifter, so if you were to take Matt Frazier and Brent Fikowski, which is a good example in CrossFit, you know, Brent Fikowski is like 6'2", 6'3", Matt Frazier's 6'9".
5'9", 5'8".
Oh yeah, 5'9", sorry. Brent Fikowski can't train at the same volume because from a physics standpoint, every rep that Brent Fikowski is doing, he's doing more work.
Yep.
Because he has to move the barbell farther.
Yep.
So blog style programming doesn't take that into...
It just doesn't. I mean, we could probably talk about this
Oh,
for
dude,
another
we can
hour.
talk about the difference here for fucking
individualization.
hours.
We could literally have a whole podcast on the importance of individualization. So if you're just following a generic program and you're not aware of your current pitfalls and your gender differences, and all those examples we just laid out, you're not going to be getting better nearly as quick as you could if you had a coach behind your back that's recognizing this stuff and programming accordingly.
Oh yeah, everything that we're going to talk about today, we can easily do another 2-hour episode on.
Okay, so first, more so about your company. You get someone walk in, and now the reference used to be, so how do I get to regionals? What is an appropriate measurement for this for regionals? So now I would probably say it's going to be, okay, what is going to be an adequate number in strength to get to this competition that's going to be CrossFit sanctioned? So my first question to you, a new client comes to you, and first thing we'll talk about strength. How are you going to determine if their strength is adequate or not? How are you going to determine that?
First of all, when I think Ben Bergeron, put out a post, a month or two ago, talking about this is just the bare minimum numbers you need to hit to play the game. So if you want to make it to regionals and just compete, and this isn't talking about going to the games or being competitive, a male has to snatch 262 pounds, female has to snatch 168, a male has to clean and jerk 325, female has to clean and jerk 207, back squat for a male has to be 437, and a back squat for a female is 278. So we know those are just the numbers to play the game.
The minimum
of what you have to have if you want to even think for a second that you're going to be slightly competitive at that level.
And if that's your strength, you've got to be way above that.
Oh yeah, if you're known as a barbell guy and those are your numbers, then you need to put in some work, because then likely your conditioning probably isn't up to par if that's the case. So we determine strength levels. Well, first of all, before I even go into testing strength with an athlete, and this is for everybody really. I don't just do this for beginner clients. Is I want to know how they move. Like, what's their mechanics like? Can they do a proper push-up? Can they do a proper air squat? Can they touch their toes comfortably without pain? Can they do a hinging pattern without pain? So like not a bodyweight deadlift, but like a deadlift with nothing. Does that make sense? Because even the most advanced athletes, especially when you get top end athletes. So I have April DiGiantonio, who's one of my female athletes right now, been to regionals, a shitload of times. At this point with her, it's how can we squeeze that 1% of performance gain out of her, because at that level, that's going to make the worlds of difference. So right now, we're not like, oh, more barbell work, more conditioning. It's like, how can we improve the movement economy within that movement? And that's what is going to propel her to the next level. So
we were talking about that before. If you're somebody interested in competing in CrossFit, and if you're not moving perfectly, you probably need to rethink your goals. Like, you need to move perfectly before you even want to play the game.
Yeah.
That was one of my biggest pitfalls when I first started. My squat was garbage, and I knew I had to work on it. I mean, probably an hour a day for 2 years. I would just do air squats, work on my mobility, stretch it out. And I mean, it's gotten a lot better, but like for me, like I know my pitfalls, like I know what I have to fix. And if you're not chasing those, that's like a gimme, if you ask me. Move perfectly, and then once you move perfectly, then we'll start playing the game.
For sure. I mean, mechanics, consistency, then intensity, right? And that goes along with the periodization model that we can discuss. But like, for example, if someone can't do a Sorensen hold, so like GHD, you're laying face down, kind of like you would do a back extension. If you can't hold a Sorensen hold for like 90 seconds, which is actually pretty challenging, you have no business deadlifting even. And I know a lot of top end athletes that have, a 450, 500 pound deadlift, but can't do a fucking Sorensen hold. And here's a great example. I have a 295 snatch, a 450 back squat. I can't do a fucking proper L sit. Like, that's a problem. You know what I mean? I couldn't. I can now.
I mean, and with that hold, I hear from so many people, I don't know if it's good or bad, and I'm curious to hear your take on it. Like, if you were to design an athlete, would you rather have them posterior dominant or quad dominant? For me, I am posterior. Yeah, I'm way posterior dominant. And I hear so many people saying they're not, and then their back gets jacked up.
For sure.
But that's an interesting question. So you think posterior dominant?
I mean, your posterior chain drives your glutes especially, and your hip extensors.
Because those two are connected. If your posterior is good, you're going to have good hip extensors. You're
going to be way fucking better at CrossFit and way more set up. So I want to see, can they do 3 strict pull-ups and 3 strict dips on the rings? It doesn't matter if they're a games athlete. If a games athlete came to me, I'm going to say, I want to see you do 3 strict pull-ups and 3 strict dips.
Perfectly.
And that's their prerequisite to do gymnastics. So I get a lot of people in the general population community that are like, we don't like Coach Justin. And they're like, why? He won't let me do kipping pull-ups. I can do kipping pull-ups. Why doesn't he let you do kipping pull-ups? Well, he said I can't do 3 strict pull-ups. I'm like, well, yeah, so you shouldn't be doing anything dynamic. So it doesn't matter if it's a games athlete or Joe Schmo.
I think this goes back to a lot of girls, like you were saying, because they just need more. I mean, we know girls need more upper body volume just to get that strength.
For sure.
So if you're a girl, and I think about this a lot, I see a ton of girls always practicing muscle-ups. And I think this is a good example, good message for them to hear. If they can't do 3 perfect ring dips, and I'm talking deep all the way in the hole, all the way back up, getting the rings in a good position at the top, I don't know if you should be practicing ring muscle-ups every day.
It's like, in the off chance that you do get up on those rings, what the fuck are you going to do?
You're not going to get up.
You're not going to get out. You're not going to miraculously get a strict dip. So another prerequisite, just into squatting with your body weight, just to even do a barbell back squat, I want to see that an athlete can do a rear foot elevated split squat with their foot on the bench at a 3-0x1 tempo with 33% of their body weight in each hand.
So 3 on the way down.
3 seconds down, 8 reps per leg with 33% of your body weight in your hand. So for example, 190-pound male.
That would be hard. I'm thinking
it's
about
hard as shit, dude.
That would be hard.
190-pound male, the math might be give or take a few numbers here, needs to be able to do a rear foot elevated split squat, 3 seconds down, 8 reps per leg with a 70-pound kettlebell in each hand for 8 reps each leg. And if they can't pass that test, they don't need to be squatting. So what we do is a lot of unilateral work to get them to that point, and then you graduate to that, and then now we're squatting. And they might get worse initially from it, but in the long run, they're going to be such a better CrossFit athlete because of it. And that's a test that I've had a lot of people who squat over 400 pounds fail, and I'm like, we're not squatting anymore.
Basics first.
Yeah.
Basics first.
You don't have them squat for 6 weeks, do a lot of unilateral work, get that number down, and then I'm saying, okay, let's squat now. And then next thing you know, they're PRing their back squat by 20 pounds.
Yeah, this is a very good point. So why do you think that is? Do you think it's just simply from mechanics, because their mechanics improve, or do you think they're actually recruiting more muscle fibers?
Mechanics improve, definitely. So they're training a lot of neglected muscles. So for example, like the difference between a back squat and a sumo stance box squat, it's both squatting, but it trains completely different muscles. So for example, a lot of Olympic lifters are doing, conventional stance back squat. You never see them doing sumo stance, which is odd because sumo stance back squat will improve your pulling from the ground so much. So for example, I could put you through a 6-week cycle. You're not going to do any Olympic lifting over 70%, maybe even 65%. You're going to do a lot of position work. I'm going to have you do a lot of sumo stance box squat, strengthen your hips up, and then I'm going to have you test your 1RM snatch, and you might PR by 10 or 15 pounds simply because your hip muscles and pulling from the floor got a lot better.
But then in the moment, you're that athlete that's just like, oh my gosh, I haven't hit my PR in 1 month. I'm weak. And it's just like, no, that's not the way it works.
Yeah, there's cycles where I'm going to make the athlete not permanently worse, but for that time frame, their numbers might go down and they might feel like shit. Cal Dietz, the strength coach at Minnesota, said it best. You got to crack a few eggs to make an omelet. You know what I'm saying? So you got to do a couple things first. They might regress a little bit. Take these small steps and they're going to get better. So if that means not letting them back squat for 6 weeks because they can't rear foot elevated split squat, those prereqs, it's going to make them better in the long run. You just got to get the athlete to buy in at that point and just trust you. And that's the challenging part of coaching athletes individually, is getting them to trust that process. So you have to be very verbal, like, this is why we're doing this, and this is why you're going to be so much better for doing this. So to go deeper into your question, we look for strength. Once they've graduated all those prereqs, we look for the deadlift to be 125% of their back squat, their power clean to be 60% of their back squat, power snatch 51% of their back squat, and their 1 RM weighted pull-up, and keep in mind that's after they've done 3 strict pull-ups, 65% of their strict press. And we know if we have those numbers or within, like a percent or two, they have balanced strength fitness. If they don't have those numbers, we start to look deeper into.
It's when you have those massive holes
Yeah.
that you don't recognize.
Yeah.
Those end up screwing you over down the road.
So like if your back squat and deadlift are the same, that's a problem.
That's a very big
You know what I
problem.
mean?
Your back's probably can get jacked
Yeah.
up.
So then we start to look at, do we need a front squat or back squat more? Do
So
we
yeah,
need to
that's a
pull
good
from the
question right
ground?
there. So you have so let's say an athlete comes to you, and I think this is so common with so many people I work out with, or have seen online, whatever. Their squat is better than their deadlift.
Yeah,
what
I've
do you
seen that.
what do you do for that person?
Oh my God, that is a fucking train wreck waiting to happen.
But that's so common, is it
For
not?
sure. Yeah, so
common.
we take them off the barbell completely, first of all. They shouldn't be on the barbell. We start working, some posterior chain, simple
like
exercises.
a good morning.
Yeah, like good mornings.
You've got to
or
be able to do
GHD back extension. So I like to start with isometrics first. So they're going to do, a Sorensen hold. So as I explained earlier, is in the GHD face down holding, we're going to get some isometric strength within the posterior chain. We'll get a little more dynamic with it so we can do good mornings, sled pull throughs.
And just about the good mornings, like I will always, just like in just general classes, like people underestimate how much, if you can do a perfect good, like how important it is to be able to do a perfect good morning. Like if you're just, whether you're a competitor or general athlete, and you walk into the gym, probably like every day, all of us do, you put that PVC on your back, you do a couple good mornings. If you're not doing that perfectly, there's a problem.
So I'm sure I'm sure you've heard of him. I'm sure most of our listeners have heard of Westside Barbell and Louis Simmons. His prereq for his athletes, and I haven't even attempted to try this because I know I can't do it and it'd be dangerous. I don't remember the exact numbers, so I'm going to have to look this up and get back to you guys. But he requires his athletes to be able to good morning for 3 reps, 75% of their 1 RM squat clean.
I did like my 30% good mornings like 2 weeks ago, and my hamstrings were sore for like a month.
And if you can't do that, he considers your posterior chain weak as shit. So then
Louis Simmons, by the way, is like probably the man in charge of all powerlifting. Would you agree? Like if there's a guy that you go to for all knowledge regarding powerlifting, and his word means everything.
Yeah,
would you agree?
In this community, he's regarded as like a god.
Yeah,
if you want to get strong,
he's a little crazy. He's a little out there, but the dude knows everything about strength and conditioning.
And I don't agree with everything he says, but all of his books, you can pull a lot of good golden nuggets out of there. Posterior chain development, you can do sled power walks, you can do shit like that. And then once we get that to a point that I'm comfortable of having the athlete start moving a barbell again, we start, do we work the anterior side? Do we work the posterior side? So are we front squatting, back squatting, sumo stance box squatting, sumo stance deadlifting, seated good mornings? It just takes a really deep analyzation of the athlete.
And that's what it comes down to. That is what you do.
Yep,
you get the athlete, have them do almost seemingly, from the athlete's perspective, pointless, monotonous exercises, and then you watch them very closely to see how well they do it, and then you get a very good idea of their holes in their game, and then you program accordingly.
And that's the fucking problem with CrossFit, man, and social media nowadays, is that people aren't posting that shit. Every games athlete is doing shit like this. But all people see is them posting videos of, I just snatched 300 pounds.
Or Jacob Hebner posting his sorority rush week when he does like 5 girls back to back to back.
Yeah.
But what they probably don't see, and I'm starting to understand this more and more, and I've been doing it all the time, just like you're probably going to go home tonight and probably for at least 30 minutes, you're just going to move perfectly, whether you're stretching, whether you're doing air squats, wall squats, whatever it is, you're going to do perfect movement and focus on your recovery.
Exactly.
For a chunk of the time.
Tell you exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go home right now after this. I'm going to put on 5-pound ankle weights. I'm going to walk my dog for 45 minutes and work on perfect heel strike down to the toe walking mechanics because I have weak hips. So it's little shit like that people don't see because I'm not posting it on Instagram, and I know there's games athletes doing that, and I know there's elite level powerlifters doing that aren't posting that shit, so people think it's stupid and people think it's pointless. But the gains aren't made when you're doing a Metcon. The gains aren't made when you're PRing your snatch. The gains are made in all the little bullshit that you're doing to improve the little things.
Absolutely. At this level, you've got, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Everything's got to be perfect. You got to be feeling perfect, move perfect, and
for sure,
you got to know what you got to do to feel great.
Yeah.
And to feel great year round in this sport is a challenge. As anybody who does it, and I always tell people, and I would say I'm just coming out of it. When you first start CrossFit, I always describe to people, you almost if you're competing, you enter this, like you learn how to do CrossFit. Let's say you do class WODs for the first year and then you start competing. I always tell people you enter this Goldilocks stage where your recovery, your nutrition, it doesn't really matter. And it's bad to say, but it's true. And you can get away with it for, we'll say, 6 months to a year, depending on the person. But then that Goldilocks stage ends. If your recovery's not dialed, movement's not dialed, training's not dialed, nutrition's not dialed, you are hosed.
For sure.
And what that hose looks like for someone is different. They might burn out, they might get hurt, but the Goldilocks stage, in my opinion, is real.
You just brought up a great point with individualization again, because if I get a beginner in as compared to a regional athlete, a beginner can just look at a barbell and fucking PR. So we're doing with them, the linear periodization that I said earlier doesn't work, or the block periodization, I'm sorry. That's what we're doing with, beginner athletes, because they're not taxing their neurological system as much, so they can squat every day of the week. And every week we're just saying, put 5 pounds on more than you did last week. Put 5 pounds on more than you did last week.
That's what Misfit does.
What's up? Yeah.
That's what Misfit, they would literally have programs where it'd be like heavier than last week.
Yeah. And in a 6-week time frame, you might have someone put on 70 fucking pounds in their back squat. But that's going to stop eventually. I mean, that's when they get done with that stage that you said. There's a point when you're not going to be able to keep putting on 5 pounds on your back squat.
Well, like me and you, let's say we were doing, I remember this one test we would always do. It would be 5x5, touch and go for Misfit, ground to overhead, so power clean, push jerk, and then they do it for like 4 weeks every time, heavier than last week.
Yeah.
So let's say me and you do that. So first week, we start at weight where we get it comfortably. Second weight, a little harder. Third week, we're getting to that point where it's just like in training, you have to be able to make this distinction. Can I do that? Yes. Is it going to look horrible? Yes. Should I do it? No.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest distinctions. Like, I'm starting to make more. I'm just like, I'm not going to go crazy heavy. I would rather do a weight that's 5% less and move it perfectly, but better. And that's a huge distinction.
For you, example, like I'm glad you don't do that, because I saw, I think, an Instagram video of you clean and jerking 345 the other day. So you far exceed the minimum requirement. So it's like, you can't ever be too strong, but when is it a priority still? You know what I mean? Like, if you are my athlete, we're not doing a whole shitload of strength work, and we're not doing maximal touch and go work. We're doing position work. We're doing, how are we strengthening your hips? How can we clean up the mechanics a little bit? And that's where the gains are going to be made. Whereas a beginner, it's like, just put on more weight. Just put on more weight. Just keep putting on more weight until we pass that fucking phase, or until it starts looking like shit, obviously.
I mean, like what you just said, I think I can do it to myself, I would like to say, somewhat accurately. Probably not as good if I had somebody like you in my ear. But like, I know, like you just said, I had that clean and jerk. But the thing is like the guys I work out with, I am constantly skipping out on strength workouts. Like if it's always specifically front squats. I skip front squats like crazy because they hurt my body, and I usually do back squats. But that being said, I do them sometimes. But I am always skipping strength workouts because, like you just said, a 345 clean and jerk, I can play the game, and I'm slightly above the game. Yeah. So if I get a 355 clean and jerk, is that making a very big difference? No. But what will make a difference is if for me, my gymnastics, you find that bottom hole and then you raise it. So if I take my gymnastics and get it way better, that's going to do significantly more than me putting 20 pounds on my clean and jerk at this point. At this point, it's just for Instagram now.
It's like, where is it going to benefit your game at this point? You have a better, just like you said, a better chance at like, let's drop down to 65% of your clean and jerk and do a fucking 30-minute EMOM of it and get really good at doing it tired. You know what I mean? Yeah. For you, it's not going to benefit really to get stronger. You could... if you were at the CrossFit Games, you're not going to complete that clean ladder from last year. But that's a really rare fucking scenario.
I'm not there yet. Yeah, I can't think about that yet. And this is the next thing I want to talk about. So I am not looking at myself like, I don't look at those CrossFit Games workouts like I have to do them, because I don't right now. I am not there. Why would I look at that and say I have to do that? Well, I look at the regional workouts that used to be. Now I'll be looking at these CrossFit sanctioned events and seeing what I have to do. That is what I look at, because I am almost there. So then my question to you is, what's the difference between people training for regionals and the open? Because I'll see people that are no doubt open athletes, like 100%. And there's a huge difference between that. First, answer this question. Help me understand the difference between a regional athlete and an open athlete.
Yeah, so as far as like conditioning wise and strength wise, there might not be a whole lot of difference between a regional and open athlete. I know a lot of people in the open, myself as an example, who can clean and jerk a shitload, who can snatch a shitload. I have great monostructural conditioning numbers when you test them. But the difference is the density of the workouts, and I'll get into that, and being able to perform really high skill movements under fatigue and being able to perform lower percentages of your barbell work under fatigue. People who are open athletes can't do that. People who are regional athletes are exceptional at that. So let's say I put, a long fucking chipper and then there's 30 muscle ups at the end of it.
You can blast through that as a regional athlete.
Yeah.
As an open athlete, you get to the rings
and you're doing twos.
And you just did some thrusters and your shoulders are smoked. You can't do anything.
Yeah. And, the regional athlete is just cranking that shit out at almost no difference than he would be doing it fresh. Same with the...
that's interesting. That's a good way to put it. I agree with that.
18-1's a great example, too, of the strength numbers I said, is that the regional athlete was able to go hard as a motherfucker on the very first portion. And then the clean portion, they were able to lift somewhere in the 95% realm.
Yeah, 18-2, where you did the burpees, squats, and then you had the max clean. So it's essentially how well do you lift heavy when your legs are smoked.
I looked at the data, and people who were at the regional level hit a minimum of 95% of their 1RM for that. And there's even people who PR'd. So the open athlete, a great example again is myself. I went hard as shit on the first one, and I got a really decent score. I have a 355 squat clean. I was able to only clean 297 at that point. So that was the difference between me and a regional athlete, an open athlete versus a regional athlete. They can do that really well. Another thing between the regional and open athlete, in my opinion, is that they're able to handle a higher density of training. So they're able to do more in less amount of time.
Okay, and so this is probably might be the most important point of this whole podcast, if you ask me. So doing more in a less amount of time. So I see so many people, I have multiple people in my head that they'll do just as much as me, but they're nowhere near as fit as me.
Yeah.
And it sounds horribly arrogant, but that's not the way they should be training. Just because intensity before volume, right? I think that's the first thing we can agree with. So if somebody's trying to do just as much volume as me, but it's taking them 2 hours longer than me, they're probably hurting themselves more than they're helping themselves.
For sure. I have an athlete who, isn't on crazy volume by any means, but their training sessions will take 3 hours. And I'm like, what are you doing? Are you bullshitting between A and B?
In your mind, you're giving them an hour and a half session?
Yeah. So I say minute A, you do minute 1 through 15. And now they're accumulating that same volume in a 90-minute time frame that they were doing 3 hours. The volume wasn't any higher. The intensity wasn't any higher. But they were like, holy shit, that was twice as hard. I'm like, yeah, you did more. You did more work technically.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
And I think, that's...
Just look how much work we tacked in a 70-minute time
I'm looking
frame.
at that right now. So if you that was a good amount of work, and I'm 100% more than fine just doing that.
Yeah.
That was a lot of work. But I know a lot of people out there that we just essentially did 72 minutes of
straight conditioning
with, we'll say, maybe 15 minutes of intervals in there, ton of conditioning, and we didn't do anything more. And that's all we did, but we hit it at a pretty good intensity, and we warmed up for it, we were ready for it, but that's all we did. And then there's people out there that'll say that's not enough, and then they'll go try and do another Metcon. The problem is, if me and you waited, I would say I would have had to have waited, and this is the important thing, like you just said, I would have had to have waited at least 20 minutes before I could go back into something.
For sure.
And let's say I did go back into something, the intensity's garbage.
Yeah.
Garbage. And then I'm always telling people this, if you're going into Metcons with no intensity, you're better off stopping. Why are you doing it?
It's pointless.
If you're going at 70% and you feel like you're dead, stop.
Yeah.
Now.
So to give the listeners an example, we did a 6-minute AMRAP, rest 3 minutes, a 4-minute AMRAP, rest 2 minutes, 1,200 meter row, 3 sets of that. So technically 9 total conditioning pieces. It took 72 minutes. And the idea was to increase from 80% to 90%. And that's the difference right there, is being able to pace up, not getting worse and losing intensity by the last row, for example, and getting that density in, so the max amount of work in the littlest amount of time.
That's a hard goal. I think I would have never been able to do that, we'll say 6 months ago, for a 72-minute conditioning piece.
Yeah, that takes...
To improve across, that's pretty hard to do. And just pacing,
takes a lot of
the open athletes we were saying, that would probably be out of their capacity to be able to do that.
If you took, someone who just does, your typical an hour a day CrossFit class, that person and me might have the same Fran time, so you would think, they're just as good as each other. But if you tried to bring them into this conditioning session, they would have got halfway through and had to stop. And that's not to knock on those people. It's just they haven't built up that density.
Yep.
And density is built up over time.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing I've noticed. And this is only a few more minutes here. One of the biggest, and this is one thing. So there's so many people out there that will do their conditioning or the 2 split sessions. And I don't know why my body, I've tried doing the 2 times a day session. It doesn't work for me.
Doesn't work for me either.
I do one training block in my day, and it'll last 3.5 hours. Anything more than that, I'm not going hard. And if I try to split, I'm hosed. Like my hormones go way out of whack right away. Just elevating super high in the morning and then trying to elevate super high at night, I'm done. Like I could maybe sustain that for like a month and then I'm burnt out.
I don't like it either. I do I have 2 sessions a day programmed for me from my coach, and him and I have discussed it, and I just do it all in one piece. But the nice thing about it is for a weekend time frame, I can sustain that. So let's say when we go to the Turkey Challenge, because I'm sure both of us are going to compete in it this year, doing that weekend of competing is going to feel way less than what you normally do in training.
It is. And it is. Like we just said we almost did double the amount of volume as workout 17.5.
For sure.
But the only thing is we're going to be going at it with way more intensity at the Turkey Challenge. Mm-hmm. And that's the only kicker to it.
Yeah. So, to answer your question, that's the difference between regional athletes, and that's the difference, honestly, between preparing for the open and regionals is building the athlete into high intensity, dense work. Whereas the open, you're only expected to perform 1 workout a week. So it's just intensity based. So
take home message, if you're a competitive athlete and you are stretching your sessions out to 5 or 6 hours, but you are doing an 1.5 hour planned session, comp train. Let's think comp train or misfit. I would say those volumes, if you do all of it, should probably be able to do it, no doubt, under 3 hours.
For sure.
No doubt.
Yeah.
And if you're stretching that out to 5-6 hours, you're hurting yourself.
Yeah. And this isn't to talk shit about misfit or comp train, but if you're following those blogs, you're constantly competing and not training.
Yeah, and that was one of the biggest things we've talked about today, that you need to be the huge distinction between training and competing. And if you compete all the time, out of the Goldilocks stage, you're running yourself into the ground.
And if 70% of your conditioning work right now in this phase of the year, assuming that the platform for competitive CrossFit doesn't change, isn't monostructural work, you're doing too much competing. It's too hard on your body.
Yes. That was one of the first things I said to you. I was like, dude, you're doing a crazy amount of monostructural stuff according to your Instagram. And you essentially said, yeah, and you told me how much you were doing. And then I was just like, well, you know what? The point we're at, when you want to make gains in your engine, that is what you do. You don't go and do Fran every day. You sit on a rower, go run, or sit on a bike.
Yep.
That's how you improve your aerobic system, not by doing Metcons all day, every day.
Yep. And now when I go do a Metcon, like today we had mixed modal stuff, things felt aerobic and repeatable.
Yep.
Which is what wins CrossFit events.
Agreed.
So that's the takeaway from that right there.
All right, man. I think we hit quite a bit of good stuff. Last question. Someone wants to reach out to you. Someone wants to look into Dark Horse or you personally. Where will they find you?
So our Instagram feed, Dark Horse Performance _CO. You can reach us at www.darkhorse.training. So that's our website, and there you can book a free consult if you're interested in training. If you're not ready to book a free consult and want to just hit me up for some information, you can email me directly at justin@darkhorse.training.
Cool. All right, man. First one in the books.
For sure.
It's fun.